Hello, everyone. Great to see so many people here. Thank you for joining. And we've got an hour together today, and we're talking about the future of work. And it's great to see some people who I know, some names that are familiar, as well as some people who are here for the first time. So please make the most of the time that we've got here together. We've got an hour, and for people who know me, you know that I like to make these sort of sessions quite interactive as well, and still deliver value for you. Well, definitely deliver value for you. So just in case you're new to Zoom, so feel free to, if you want to turn your camera on, you're welcome to do that. It's not necessary, and you don't need your microphone on either. We'll be using the chat room quite a bit, but feel free to do that if you want to. The other thing is to use the emoji buttons, the reactions on Zoom, and we're looking at, like you'll see the buttons there, and you can use emojis, and please do them. Please do use them throughout the time that we've got together. In fact, just for the moment, let's engage, just get started, because today is very much about looking ahead to the year ahead and even beyond that. So can I ask, please, use the emoji reactions on Zoom to just tell me, how are you feeling about 2025? And rather than typing it in the chat, use your little emoji reactions, and we'll see what the sentiment of the room is and how you're feeling about the year ahead. Okay, so I can see a few open mouths. Thumbs up. Good, good. There's a range. That's good to see. Okay, so my goal today is not to give you certainty about the future, because nobody can do that. My job is to give you more clarity and confidence about thinking about the future of work for the year ahead, and knowing that it won't be certain, but I can help you perhaps make better and more well-informed decisions about what the next 12 months and beyond are going to hold for us. So great to see some people who are feeling really positive around this. And so let's look at, first of all, my three standard rules of engagement for all my sessions are these three. So I definitely want to give you some things to think about in this session. I want to invite you to play in this session. If you're here live, then there'll be some opportunities for you to engage. I'll stop and you can ask me questions. You can actually type questions in the chat at any time. And when I stop for questions, I'll answer as many questions as I can. And also, I really want to give you some things that you can take away and put into action. I know we've got people from all around the country here, and maybe even elsewhere. So let me ask you, where are you from? So if you just type in the chat what city, town you're from, let's see where people in the room are from. So good. So some from, so I see Brisbane, Sydney. Yeah, some people from Perth, which is my hometown, Melbourne, Perth. Good, and some from New Zealand as well. Great to see. I'll be doing a bit of work in New Zealand next year as well, which I'm really looking forward to going back there again. Okay, so there's a mix from around Australia. Okay, so let's have a look at this idea of the future of work. And I'm going to start with a story. This is something that actually happened to me about 10 years ago now, where I got a really interesting insight into the future just from something that happened, which was very local. So a couple of 100 meters down the road from where I live, there's our local park. And there's a sign in it's called Britannia Reserve, and we used to take our dog, a Cocker Spaniel Jessie, for a run in that park. And Jessie's unfortunately no longer with us, but we have two other Cocker Spaniels, Harley and Jasper, who are now part of our family. But I remember 10 years ago when we first took Jessie for a run in the park, our local council, in their wisdom, had zoned the park into two areas. It's a big community park. It's used for all sorts of things, sports, recreation, and of course, it's a dog park as well, as I mentioned. So the council, on this sign here that you can see in the background, let me zoom that in for you, they'd zoned the park into two areas, and you can see that they've on the sign there's one area that's blue, and the blue area is where you can let your dog off the leash. The red area on the northern part of the park is where you had to have your dog on the leash. Now, the thing is, there were signs all around the park explaining this to us. But the problem was between the blue area and the red area, there was no fence, there was no gate, and Jessie can't read. So of course we let her loose in the blue area, and then she'd run everywhere around the park. And even 10 years ago, I was thinking, this is exactly what disruption's like. Like the dogs are off their leash, and there's no way that we can hope to bring them back under control. And this is what we face in our world, and we all experience this. Few years ago with COVID, and now it's AI. Tomorrow, who knows what it's going to be. And this idea of having constant disruption and constant change and constant uncertainty is going to be with us. This is what the future holds, because things are changing faster and faster. So that idea of having stability is something of the past. So when you think about the future of work, people have lots and lots of different views as to what that might mean. And I've got a few of them here. So you might be talking about AI, you might be talking about continuous learning, different careers, hybrid work is a big topic at the moment, of course. How do you build the right sort of culture? Where does DEI fit in? How do you make sure that work's aligned with personal values? Mental health is a big issue at the moment. ESG, climate change and sustainability, is included in that. And then are you working in an organization that's making a difference? So different people, when you're talking about the future of work, will have different ideas about what that exactly means. I'm going to break it down to simplify it into these 4 areas, these 4 pillars of the future of work. And they all start with the letter A. So the first one is to understand what work's coming up in the future, so that we know that that's what we need to focus on. And also it means that we then have to attract the right people to be able to do that work. And I know I was very careful to say people there, because the third part of this is how do humans and machines work together. And the talk over the last couple of years has obviously been around AI, but it's not only about AI. This is part of digital more broadly, and it's having data literacy as well, which we'll talk about soon. And the fourth area is then building that culture. Building that culture that not only is okay with change, but embraces change and ideally even leads the change. So those are the 4 aspects of the future of work that we're going to look at today. And so we'll go through each of them. I'm going to give you some practical things in each area. I'm going to invite you in some of them to share some practical things that you're doing for the future of work. In your organizations and for your teams. And we'll cover each of these 4 areas, and I'll give you time for questions as well. As I want to say, like this is being recorded, so whatever you're sharing in the chat, of course, I know that you look after your own organization's confidentiality and privacy and so on, but please can I encourage you, when we get to the point of asking you to share, please share whatever you're willing to share with other people. Okay, so I have got a little puzzle for you here. Okay, so this is an interactive puzzle. I'm going to ask you to answer this in the chat. So there are these 4 companies I'm going to show you, and I'm asking you, what do these 4 companies have in common? Okay, so the first one's Groupon. In Australia, Scoopon's probably the more common version. This is a marketing and advertising company that works on coupons and discounts. The next one is Slack, which is one of the fastest companies in the world, fastest growing companies in the world a few years ago. It's like an alternative to email in workplaces. And the next one we all know, Uber, is ride sharing, delivery services and other things like that. And the last one is WhatsApp, a communications organization. So can I ask you in the chat, tell me what you think those 4 companies have in common? Let me see what people are saying. Okay, so I can see innovative solutions. By the way, there's more than one right answer to this. Okay, so let me share a couple of things. So no physical store, which is this, same as what Sally said, totally online, electronic. They're innovative, which is true as well. They're online and they're disruptive. Okay, so Richard says, yeah, they're relatively new, and that is true. Okay, let me tell you one other thing that those four companies have in common. They were all founded during the GFC, during the global financial crisis, which luckily in Australia we managed to escape the worst of it. But these four companies were founded during a time of crisis and change and uncertainty. And you might think that it takes a lot of courage to start a company in that time, like when there's crisis. And it does, like it takes courage to start a company at any time. But sometimes it's easier in a crisis because the crisis has done a lot of the disruption for you, because people are looking for change, they're looking for alternatives, they're watching their money carefully, they get more concerned and are more focused on things like customer experience. So it's easier for smart, savvy startups to come along and disrupt. And this is true now. As I said, we've got ongoing uncertainty and change, and if you don't adapt to that, then your competitors will jump in, and sometimes competitors who don't even exist now. Okay, so that's just a bit of a warning to get started. Let's look at these four areas now. So the first one is understanding the work that is coming up in the future. I've got another little puzzle for you. I'm going to ask you to answer this. So isn't it good to be here live? So if you're watching the recording, hello to you, but you get to miss out on some of these interactive bits and pieces. I've got another puzzle for you, and this one's a puzzle which is a logic puzzle. Okay, so let me show this to you, and I'm going to ask you a question and then ask you to answer it in the chat. So I've got four cards here. And each card, I can tell you, has a picture on the front of the card. So you can see number 2 has a fish and number 4 has a dragon. And each card has a solid color on the back. So you can see the back of 2 of the cards. You can see a red and a yellow. So if I make this statement that every red back card has a dragon on the front or on the other side, I wonder, is that true or false? Now, before you jump in and type in the chat, you probably figured out, I'm sure there's some people here who have already figured out, that you can't tell for sure, okay, without turning over some of the cards, whether that's true or false. So the real question I'm asking you is, which cards must you turn over to be able to tell me for sure whether it's true or false? Okay, so if you think it's all the cards, even though I told you it's not, just type in the chat 1, 2, 3, 4. If you think it's some other combination, type in the combination of cards that you think I must turn over to be able to tell me for sure whether it's true or false. Okay, so I can see some guesses coming in, or calculations coming in. I can tell you no one's yet got the right answer, so if you want to guess again, if you've already had a go, then please do so. Okay, let's see. Okay, we do have a correct answer here, and it's from Gabrielle. So thank you, Gabrielle. So the correct answer is 1 and 2. So let me explain that to you. So I'll explain how the logic works behind this. So first of all, there are 2 easy answers to this. Okay, so obviously you need to turn over card number 1 to see whether there's a dragon on the back. And the other easy one is you don't need to turn over number 3 because it doesn't have a red back, so it's irrelevant. You also don't need to turn over number 4 because, this is the surprising one, because if it's got a red back, it doesn't tell you anything more, it doesn't give you any extra information. And if it has some other color like yellow or blue or black or whatever, then it becomes irrelevant, like number 3. You do need to turn over number 2 because if it's got a red back, the statement is false. So as Gabrielle said, the correct answer is 1 and 2. Okay, so now here's the thing. The reason I'm sharing this here is because I reckon we've got 2 kinds of futures. And when you're assessing what work is coming up in the future, you should think about it this way. See, what happens is whenever I do this, most people get number 1 correctly, but many people don't get number 2 because there's no red, there's no back, and there's no dragon. And when we think about our future, there are these 2 kinds of futures. And if you're thinking about the work that we have to do in the future, there are these 2 kinds. So one is where we know what the future holds, and for some things we do. So we can plan and strategize and resource our organization, our team, to get to that future. But the second kind is the future like number two, where we don't know what it's going to look like. And in some ways, we just can't know. Like we don't have a crystal ball, so we can't tell exactly what's happening. But if we can understand a little bit more about that future, it makes it easier to assess the work that needs to be done in that future. Okay, so part of your job as a leader, so part of our job as a leader is to work internally and make sure we're managing and leading and setting visions and doing operational work within the organization. But another part of that job, and one that's often ignored, is to look externally to what sort of things might be and will affect us in the future. So I've got a question for you here, and I'll invite you. So the question is this, right? Are you confident that you know the major things that are going to disrupt your team or your organization? And I'd like you to do this, to answer this, because it's too difficult to just go yes or no. But on a scale of 1 to 10, how confident are you that you understand what might disrupt you in the future? So not necessarily the things that you know are like the card number 1, but what are the things that are maybe unknowns that most people in the industry don't see? So how do you rate yourself in terms of your being able to scan externally? See what people are saying. Okay, give you a little bit of time to give yourself a rating from 1 to 10. So 1 says, I'm not confident at all. 10 says, yep, absolutely know what's coming up in the future. Let's see where people are. Okay, good. Good. So whenever I run this, like generally, it ends up around the middle. There's some people who are, I very rarely get people who are very, very confident. And there are none who are very, very confident here. I often get people who are right down the low end, and that's good. And thank you for sharing that. But generally, it's in the middle. And I reckon the more that we can move this to the higher end, the better equipped we are as leaders for understanding the work that's going to be required in the future. Okay, so thank you everyone for doing that. Appreciate that. So what do we do about this? Okay, so it's one thing to say, I don't know very much about it. And what do we do about it? So in my Future Scenarios program, we work through exactly this. So it's a 1 or a 2 day workshop where we look at, the first thing that we do is an environmental scan of what are the sort of things even outside your industry that might affect your future. And the second part of it is then prioritize and decide on the ones that are most important for you, and then decide what actions you're going to take. So we're not going to do the full scenario, Future Scenarios program here today, obviously, but let's do an example of this. Okay, and it's part of being able to connect what's happening externally with your team and organization. And my favorite example when I do this is self-driving cars, because lots of people are now thinking about and talking about self-driving cars because we've already got self-driving cars on the road, but many people think of it, self-driving cars, as only being for cars. And it's about traffic and transport, but it can go much broader than that. This picture, by the way, is a very old picture of one of Google's early self-driving cars. Now, of course, they're very different from that. But let's imagine a future where we've got self-driving cars. So we're going to do a little activity here, and I'm going to do it here in the room, and then I'll encourage you to do it with your team as well. So to start with, I'm not going to call on volunteers, but I will ask you in the chat, because we're going to pick an industry. So just, can you type in the chat what industry you're in? Okay, I know there's some people here from healthcare. I know there's some people here from business management, okay, logistics, education, healthcare, financial services. Okay, a lot of people are saying healthcare, so let's pick healthcare as the industry. So as a group, imagine that you're a senior leader in a healthcare organization. Okay, and now we're looking at the effect of self-driving cars on this industry. Okay, so here's a chance for you to now say, okay, so what self-driving cars have to do with healthcare? Well, let me give you one example. So one example is self-driving cars. If all the cars on the road are self-driving, it's a much safer environment. Because the big problem with self-driving cars at the moment is not the technology in the cars, it's that they have to share the road with us, with humans. But if all the cars on the road were self-driving, there would be far fewer accidents, there'd be far fewer emergencies requiring emergency services, and there'd be far fewer deaths. Okay, so for healthcare purposes, that's an obvious impact or effect of self-driving cars. Okay, what else? If you're in healthcare, imagine yourself as a leader in a healthcare organization, and we have a future where we've got all the cars on the road are self-driving. Okay, what else? So this is our chance to be a little bit creative here. So I can see some examples here. Let me share a couple of them. Patient transport, mobility for the elderly, delivery of medications. In fact, this is already happening, not so much with self-driving cars, but with drones. Yes, so Sally, you're exactly right. Like seniors will be able to be mobile for much longer. So my dad has just decided not to renew his driver's license. He's in the late 80s and he's just sold his car. But for him now, if he had self-driving cars available, then that would be more convenient. Parking, yeah, okay. So Roshan, and I know parking is a big issue in the organization where you work, where parking, if you're going to a hospital or a medical facility, absolutely. Yeah, it's an interesting one here, right? Like outreach clinics. Maria says regional care is easier. Yeah, okay. Imagine also if you've got self-driving ambulances, where all the cars on the road know to give way to emergency vehicles, so there's no problem with ambulances because everybody else stops and gets out of the way. Yep, Cassandra, exactly. Maintain independence for longer, which is the thing with my dad, like driver's license renewal. Moderating car sizes. I'm not quite sure what you mean by that one, Richard. Increased productivity, less staff injury. Yeah, insurance. Yeah. So now I really like this, what you've said here, Julia. Oh, no, Julia. Yes, because you work in that area as well. Bring clients to services, and the opposite as well, like bringing more services to clients. Okay, because that's an opportunity as well. Yeah, safety for at school drop-off and pick-up times. Yep, again, reduce accidents. Great, fantastic to see. And whenever I do the self-driving car example, there's lots and lots of interest in that and feedback on that and ideas around that, and which is great to see. And I reckon you should be doing the same thing. So even if you don't do the whole future scenarios, let's do the full scan to find out what are the most important trends and then narrow it down and then figure out the actions that we're going to take, which is what I do in my future scenarios program. I'm going to invite you to do this exercise with your team regularly. And the simple way to do it, because it's all about trying to do things quickly rather than wait until you've got 2 days to send somebody along, to send your leaders along to Gihan Perera's Future Scenarios program. By the way, if you want to do that, then please get in touch with me. I'm not saying don't do that, but in the meantime, I want you to become like when you're talking about the future of work and build this culture. I want you to do it in small little bits. So here's what I suggest you do. If you've got a regular staff meeting, might be weekly, every fortnight, then set aside 5 minutes in the staff meeting. This is quite a good way to start the meeting, to say, hey, has anybody seen something interesting out in the world? Maybe self-driving cars, or Elon Musk's fake walking and talking robot, or whatever it is. If you've seen something interesting, and then say to the rest of the room, hey, what do you think that could do for us? And be creative, go wild, go crazy, but come up with ideas, just like we've done here. And it only needs to take 3 to 5 minutes in a meeting, and it does two things. So one is you might come up with some really good ideas. This two is that you get people actually thinking outside. So this is not just for you, but it's for everybody else in your team to be a futurist and to think beyond what they're doing operationally in their day-to-day role. The other thing it does for your culture to build that culture that embraces change, we'll talk about that later. And the other thing it does, it just demonstrates to people in your team that first of all, that you value thinking outside, and that people can be okay with it. They can have a bit of fun with it rather than being scared about the future. And I've seen a lot, especially in the last 18 months, I've seen a lot of leaders and teams who, with AI in particular, which is why it's the case in the last 18 months, that they're people scared of it and they're not thinking about opportunities with it. Okay, so what I'm going to do is, thank you so much for playing along with that activity. It's a really useful one for you to do with your team as well. So I'm going to give you a minute. So I'm going to stop talking and give you a minute to write down for yourself, what are you going to do? So how are you going to look further into the future? So option one, engage me to run a program for your team. But also option two, do this little activity. But also, what else? Okay, so let me stop talking and I'll give you a minute to write down what you might do. If you want to share anything in the chat, please do. If you want to share something that you're going to do, but don't feel you have to, because I want to make sure that you get value from this without feeling an obligation to share. Okay, let me share a few things that people said. So one is you could have a standing item in your agenda, which is exactly the example I shared. And thank you, Philip, that you're going to take that on board. Do it in your planning days. Yeah, so Cassandra, I think this is another really good idea, to get people to solve small problems. Okay, no matter how small, and then give them permission to work on small problems rather than going, we need to find the time for it, to say, let's create a habit of it. And the key to making this work is to make it a habit rather than something that you have to wait until you can do it. So for example, you could say something like, when you get back from lunch, the first 10 minutes or 15 minutes, just work on fixing something that irritates you. Costs you 5 minutes extra a day to do that. But if you fix it once and for all, you get back that time and you reduce your stress, for example. Yeah, so Julia says, I've already started to discuss use of AI. Yeah, fantastic. And share my online videos. Yes, good. And Julia, I know that when we work together as well, there's a whole bunch of worksheets of activities that you can use as well with your team, in case you already haven't doing that, in case you're not doing that. Yeah, Roshan, yeah, share intelligence and bring that intelligence sharing into every meeting. We'll talk about diversity soon as well, because it's a key to building that culture that's adaptive. Richard, fact-based evidence rather than relying on disinformation or misinformation. We're going to come on to that very soon. Good. Thank you so much. Thanks, everyone. Okay, let's look at this second area. So this is how you attract people into your team, into your organization, because there is a war for talent at the moment, and some people are managing that really well. Some people are managing it not so well. And we're not going to spend a lot of time in this area, because the fourth area is about building that culture that embraces change. And if you've got that sort of culture, that'll attract the right sort of people. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time in this area, but it's a big area. Like, how do you get the right people. And then when we talk about later adapt, that's how do you keep the best people. Okay, so this is some research done by Gallup. Every year, as you might know, Gallup does an employee workforce survey, a workplace survey, and this is from the 2024 Gallup survey. So this is one of the questions they asked employees. In summary, they're saying, do you think now is a good time or a bad time to look for a job? To move, in other words. Okay, so this is from the 2024 survey, and I've got a little poll here, and because Gallup does it around the world and in different regions, let's look at Australia and New Zealand specifically. So the poll question is, what percentage of employees in Australia and New Zealand said now is a good time to find a job? So there are 4 options for you, so can you please type in A, B, C, or D. Don't type in the numbers because that won't count, but type in A, B, C, or D. So A, if you think 20% of people said now's a good time to look for a job, B, 40%, and so on. So A, B, C, or D. And let me show you as people are voting. Great. Okay, so most people have voted, and most people reckon it's somewhere in the middle, 40% or 60%. I can tell you that in other parts of the world, in Asia, it's around 55 to 60%. In Europe, about the same. In the US, just over 50%. In Australia and New Zealand, 80% of people said that now's a good time to look for a job. Okay, and the first person to get that right is Sarah. Congratulations, Sarah. So look, fantastic. Like, it's interesting to see that in our market, in Australia and New Zealand, most people are confident that it's a pretty good time to look for a job if they wanted one. Okay, and that's the key. So what are you doing to make sure that you're attracting the people who are looking for a job? And later we'll talk about what are you doing to create that culture where you're going to keep the best people, the people that you've already got. As I said, I don't want to talk a lot more in this area here. Just to answer Richard's question about age, does age play a role? Yes, but this is across the board, Richard. So if you read the whole Gallup report, and it's pretty easy to find, Gallup Employee Workplace 2024, something like that, they do break it down by age and generation, but this is across the board. So the average for Australia and New Zealand across different ages. Okay, so I want to share a little bit of research that was done by Macquarie University during the pandemic. They came up with this idea of the avocado leader. And what they did was, in mid-2020, remember this is pretty early in the pandemic, they looked at leaders around Australia and organizations, and they tried to identify what the best leaders were doing to lead their teams through this major crisis. And this concept of the avocado leader is, I wish I thought of it, but they said the best leaders are like avocados. So they kind of got this hard inner core that's looking after making sure that business and organizational objectives are being met. People are still meeting their KPIs. But they've also got this soft outer layer that's looking after their people. And they said that's what the best leaders are doing. And we know that the best leaders have always been avocado leaders. But any time we've got a time of change and uncertainty and disruption, we're all being called to step up and be avocado leaders. So if you like, think of it as like leading with the head and leading with the heart. So I'm going to ask you to do a quick little survey here. And obviously, ideally, you want to be strong in both areas. You want to lead from the head and lead from the heart. Okay. However, if I was to ask you, what kind of leadership style broadly do you favor? Is it A, head, or B, heart? So just type in A or B. Don't type in head or heart. Type in A or B based on what do you think you're more of? Are you more leaning towards goals and objectives, or are you more leaning towards looking after my people? And obviously, I think you're both. But if you had to choose, let's see where we're going here. Okay, good. It's about 50-50. It's interesting, like when I do this, generally with leaders within an organization, generally there's and it's not one or the other, there's generally a bias to it, either one or the other. And I can't say that most are head and most are heart, but there's generally, and I guess in this diverse room, it's not surprising that it's kind of 50-50. Okay, so let me just say before leaving this area of attracting people that whichever area you say that you think you're weaker in, look at improving those skills, and even in the other one, because we're all being called now to be avocado leaders, and this is what our people want, as well as that's the hard side of it, as well as this is what our customers and other external stakeholders want, which is the head side of it. Okay, so have a look at both of those areas. Okay, let's move on to this third area here. This is the one around combining humans and machines. And as I said, the conversation over the last couple of years has all about how do we talk to AI better. Okay, not surprising because AI has just completely taken the world by storm, even though it's been around for a long time. But I want to make the point here, when you're thinking about the future of work, absolutely think about how humans and machines are going to work together, so it's humans and AI or humans and robots, but this is part of a bigger conversation. So if you think about where AI fits, AI is where data and digital combine. Okay, so AI, we're not calling it AI, but it's been around machine learning, about predictive analytics and all those sort of things. And it's very important to understand that it's not just about this software that's going to be super intelligent, supposedly, according to some people, not me, but it's also about being literate, so having literacy in three areas: having data literacy, having digital literacy, and then having AI literacy. And because of all the talk about AI recently, they sometimes the data side of it and the digital side of it falls by the wayside. So people say to me, how do I get my people okay with AI? I go, well, first of all, are your people okay with data? Do they understand data? Do they know how to interpret it? And also, how digital are they? And quite often, people realize that, oh, we haven't even looked at these two areas. And Richard, I think, asked a question, made a comment earlier about misinformation, disinformation, and this is all part of data literacy. It's also part of critical thinking. But let me give you a couple of examples of where you need to be literate with data and be able to know how to interpret data. Okay, let me give you this example here. Actually, give you this one, which is quite a well-known example. So let me take this one. Okay, so imagine that you had a broker. I'm not giving financial advice, and this has nothing to do with financial advice, but imagine that you had a broker and you're working with a broker, and one day your broker rang you up and said, buy this stock. And you bought the stock, and sure enough, the next day it went up. Then in a week's time, the broker comes to you and says, sell this other stock. And you sold that stock, and sure enough, there's a good decision because the price went down. Then the next day they said, doesn't really matter. As you can see here, there's different random things. So first, sometimes the broker says buy, sometimes they say sell. And after like 8 times in a row, they get the answer exactly right. They give you good advice. So then they say to you, okay, I've got a 9th prediction for you, and I want you to give me all your money and put it all on this decision that I want you to make, buy or sell or whatever. And you go, yeah, actually, he was right 8 times in a row. Okay, should you believe that because he was right 8 times in a row, you should bet your house on the 9th one? So the answer is no, okay, obviously, but can you tell me why? So just in the chat, why do you think it's not necessarily a good idea to trust because they got it right 8 times in a row? Richard says deep fake marketing strategy. It is a marketing strategy, but not necessarily a deep fake one. Some of it could be luck, absolutely, because even if it goes 50-50, then it's what, to the power of 8, 1 in 250 chance that you got it right. That law of probability, which is again around luck. It's a high risk, but except that you've got this broker who's been right so often. Okay, let me give you one other reason. Okay, so absolutely right, like gambling, it's law of probability, it's about luck, chance occurrences and so on. So you wouldn't necessarily bet your house just on this one roll of the dice, if you like. But there's another way that this broker could kind of game the system. And that is that on the first day, they tell all their clients, they look at all their clients and tell half of them to buy, half of them to sell. Okay, and then the ones that he got it right, the next day, so he discards the ones that he gave the wrong advice to. The next day they go back to the clients. He goes back to clients who he got it right, and then splits them in half again, tells half to buy, half to sell, and so on. He narrow down the list. So if you have 1,000 people, he still ends up with a handful of people who thinks this guy's a genius because he got it right 8 times in a row, not realizing that there's a huge bunch of other people who would have got the wrong advice earlier. So this is important when you look at data, like how's the data selected? Okay, and I'm just giving you this as a bit of a fun example, but it's really important for us to have that skill of being able to critically analyze data. Let me give you another example. If I asked you, what do these 5 regions in the world have in common? Okinawa in Japan, Sardinia in Italy, the Nicoya Peninsula in Costa Rica, Icaria in Greece, and Loma Linda in California, which is in the USA. So the first person to get that right was Jody. These are known as the blue zones. The blue zones, the supposedly magical parts of the world where people have live longer than in other parts of the world. And so this kind of idea came out some years ago, and people looked at this saying, okay, well, what are they doing in these blue zones? But then, more recently, people have looked more carefully at what those original researchers did to identify why these people lived longer. And so let's take Okinawa as an example. So they have these Okinawa sweet potatoes. They talked about the diet that they have that helps them live longer. They're more family oriented, so they live longer. They've got strong social connections. And in some reports that you've seen, this is the biggest one. So say you need to talk to people in person, you need to have these regular social connections, because these blue zones prove that that's the case. However, if you also look at some of the other things in Okinawa, they have the highest rates of child poverty in Japan. They have the highest murder rate in Japan. And they also have the highest number of KFCs per capita in Japan. So are you saying that these sort of things are also why people live longer? Are you saying that despite those things, people live longer? So this is the question that you need to ask when you're looking at data. And this idea of data literacy is crucial. It's crucial for us to understand, because AI builds on data. And a lot of our world now, whether it's AI or not, is reliant on data. Humans are using more data than ever before to make decisions. So it's really important for us to have data literacy in our work. So this idea of augment, which is what we're talking about here, humans and machines working together, people automatically go to AI, which is fair enough because it's a big topic at the moment. But don't forget having competency in data and having competency in digital as well, and then having competency in AI. Okay, so I'm going to give you a minute again. Write down what you're going to do to build your AI, data, and digital literacy in your team, in your organization. After this minute, I'll give you the chance to ask me some questions as well. Okay, so first, before I get on to what people have said, Maureen, when I've showed the picture of the blue zones, even before I talked about the debunking of it, it said, hasn't it been proven wrong? So you're exactly right, Maureen, as I covered. Okay, so what did people say they're going to do? Practice out, ask the right questions of AI, and also trust that your trust in AI. So people ask me when I use a tool like ChatGPT or Microsoft Copilot, how much should I trust what it tells me? And I say you should never trust it, literally never. Never trust it. Assume that it might be inaccurate, and then based on how important you're relying on that output, decide how much extra work you're going to put into it. Okay, what else do we say? Skill up, start promote. Oh, so here we go. Cassandra says, yeah, encourage playing around to become more familiar. I'm not sure whether you're talking about, Cassandra, with AI or with the data in general, but I think both of those things are worthwhile. There's some really powerful data visualization tools, for example, where you upload a spreadsheet and it creates these beautiful visualizations with animation and so on. And it's worth just getting good with that. So there's one tool called Flourish, which helps you do that if you're interested in that. Nathan's ideas, Maureen says, I like the idea of practicing how to ask the right questions, give examples of effective use, just getting it right. Yes, I think most people here are talking about AI, which is great. And I think that's exactly right. Okay, let's look at this fourth area. This fourth area is building your culture. Building a culture that, as I said, not only is okay with change, but also embraces and leads change. I've got an example here. So this is a question, again, I'd like you to answer in the chat. This is a photo that I took at a place that I went to recently, and I've blanked out a couple of things in there because it will identify where that place is. But there's a place that offers free earplugs. Okay, can I ask you to guess what that place is? It's a place any one of us could have been to. Okay, what kind of place? What kind of building or area does that? Okay, music venue, Japanese coffee shop, the gym, music, pub, building site. Hospitals for MRI, construction. Okay, so no one's got it yet. So let me show you what the answer is. A church, playground. Oh, Philip got it. Yes. This is my local library. Okay, so my local library, which I often go to because it's a nice place to get out of the house and work on days that I'm not out presenting. Oops, sorry. My local library offers free earplugs. Because libraries used to be the place where you don't need earplugs because you had to be silent, but now libraries have turned themselves into community hubs, because the library used to be the place, basically the main place that you had to go, that you went to get in-depth information. Okay, now you can still borrow books at the library, but it's no longer the main place that people go because it's so easy to get information online. So libraries have transformed themselves because the world has changed around them. So my local library, they have a knitting group once a week who comes in and use the library, and they're chattering away while they're knitting. They have a chess group. Well, actually chess, they probably are sitting there silently, but they've got other activities like that. They've got a little kids group in the corner, and they're preschool kids and even primary school kids doing loud activities, being led by a teacher, encouraged to do loud activities in the library. So the library has now become a hub for the community because its original role as being the main place where you get information has now changed. Okay, and I wonder whether you're changing as well, and whether your organization, your team, especially if you've been around for a while, are you still solving a problem that was relevant 10 to 15, 20 years ago, but isn't as relevant now? And that the world's moved on without you, but you're still struggling to try and solve those same problems. So how do you get around that? And there are lots of ways to do that. Again, engage me if you want me to talk about some of them. But one I'm going to talk about here is the idea of embracing diversity. So lots of talk about diversity and inclusion. Some people think they're the same thing, and they're just not. So diversity is like having a whole bunch of colored textures. Inclusion is about using them. Okay, so another little puzzle for you here. You can see here, this picture here, and you can see these little squares that are marked A and B in the picture. If I asked you, which of those squares is darker, A or B? What would you say? Or they're the same? Just type in the chat. We'll just see what guesses are coming in. Which one's darker, A or B? I might even be able to see what we can do here. So the chat's favoring A. Okay, so the answer actually is they're exactly the same color. Okay, the same shade of gray. So and I can prove this to you, if I draw another, put another A and another A to connect them, you can now see they're exactly the same shade of gray. But if I take away those connecting bits, then you can see that A definitely looks darker. If I said to you why, it's because, as Maria says, it's all relative, right? Because it's based on what the squares around it, our eyes and our brain, then interpret it a certain way. And this is the value. This is the value of having diverse thinking in our team, because we never see things as they are. We see things as we are. And it's very easy for us to have blind spots because of our own experience, our own lived experience, our expertise, the things that we have that have worked for us in the past, the things that have failed in the past, and there are other people with a different perspective on exactly the same issue. Okay, so this idea of diversity, I know it's not a new idea, but I think it's the biggest thing for creating a culture of change, to have diverse perspectives. And let me share with you my favorite case study from this year with a client I worked with. This is a client in the healthcare space. They do a number of healthcare services, and they engaged me to help them be more innovative, especially around AI. And we got all the leaders together and we got them into groups, and each group in our first session decided an AI project they're going to do. And then they came back a few weeks later reporting on what they did. This is one of them. They have a childcare group, and that childcare group of leaders, they created an AI to drastically reduce the time they required to create a development plan for new children who enrolled. Because every time a child enrolls, the staff have to create a development plan for them, and it used to take about 2 to 3 hours. And using AI, they brought that down to like 15 minutes, 10 to 15 minutes, because they take about 5 minutes typing up the child's interests and information, and the AI would take a couple of minutes to then draft a development plan, and then the experienced staff member would then review it and fine-tune it. Fantastic. Save themselves a lot of money, a lot of time, and they can do it more frequently now because it doesn't take as much time. But that's really not the point I'm making. So when people came back for that second session, and the leader of this team, she stood up and she explained what she did and the outcome that they got, immediately the HR team, who had their own ideas, somebody from there said, can you come and talk to us later? Because we need exactly this same software, this application, for new employees, so we can help not just onboard them, but also help them create a career growth plan within the organization. And then another part of the room, they also do aged care, and they said, can you come and talk to us as well? Because every time we have a new resident, then we want to do this kind of plan for them and their family as well. And that's what I loved. Not so much, I mean, it's a great idea, fantastic idea that they created, but I love the idea that other people in the team could get value from it. And this is the really important part of embracing diversity. It's not always easy, because sometimes it causes some friction and conflict and challenges, but it's going to be a really important part of our future. We've got some really complex problems to solve in the future, and we need diverse thinking to be able to solve them. So we need that diversity internally, because we've got diverse and complex challenges externally. I love this quotation here from Michael Houston. It says, when you bring in diversity, sure, it's not easy, but if you don't like that, then maybe innovation's not for you. And if innovation's not for you, I feel sorry for you, because it's going to be really difficult to stay competitive and stay relevant in the future. Okay, so how can you do this? So obviously, the one obvious thing is to make sure that you look at how diverse your team is, and actively and proactively add more diversity to the team. And this is at every level of the organization. There are too many organizations where there's diversity among the lower levels in the organization, but suddenly it gets whiter and whiter and maler as you go up to more senior levels. And you need the diversity everywhere. The other thing that you can do is, as a leader, what can you do for your team? And this is it's an example from Australian rules football. I'm from Western Australia, which is a Aussie Rules state, and I don't use many sporting metaphors, but I'm going to explain this one here. So for people who aren't familiar with Aussie Rules, let me explain what's happening in this picture here. So you can see the guy with his back to us in black who's running with the ball, and you can see his mate next to him, the guy in the center, who's shoving an opponent who's in the blue out of the way. Right, now that is allowed in Aussie rules, and it's not allowed in most other ball sports. In most other sports like that, if you don't have possession of the ball, you can't interfere with what's going on. American football has it, it's called running interference, but in most other sports, it's not allowed. In Aussie rules, it's called shepherding, which some people here would know. So shepherding is the idea that if your mate is running with the ball, you can legally get obstacles out of their way, clear the path for them. And I think for us as leaders, that's one of the biggest things that we can do for our team and for our team culture, is be a shepherd for the people in our team. So if they're running with the ball, be the person who clears the path for them, gets the obstacles out of the way for them. And it helps the team members, it helps you, and it helps your organization as well. Okay, so we talked about these 4 areas around the future of work. So to wrap up, so we talked about looking at assessing the work that's coming up in the future. We talked about attracting the right people to do that work. We talked about augmenting humans and machines, specifically about today, about data literacy, but the bigger conversation around AI literacy. And the last bit about building that culture of change that's adaptable. And before I finish, any last questions or comments, I'd like to know specifically what are you going to take away and put into action. So please share in the comments, in the chat, what you're going to take away and put into action from today. Okay, and I'll share what people are saying. Yep. Sharon, good to see you, Sharon. Haven't seen you for ages. Get comfortable with AI? Yeah, absolutely. Julia, outside in? Great. You're also welcome to use your emojis if you want to share how you feel now about not just this session, but about the future. Avocado leader, yeah, Cassandra, is a great thing to do. Yeah, Nathan, I think this is a really important thing to be strategic in assessing. And can I suggest that it's not only strategic, but it's tactical as well. So it's great to absolutely include this in your strategic thinking, but also do it, make it a habit. So make it something that you do. Like the staff meeting one is a really simple way to do this because it's something that's already happening. So it's easy to turn that into a habit. And Maureen says, yes, the thing about innovation, Michael Houston's quote. Embrace the future, look, especially for us as leaders, for team members to know that we're open to the future and we're open to exploring new ideas and that we need to change. Roshan, innovation needs diversity. Yeah, I love the avocado leader. Sally, appreciate the interactive nature. Great, thank you, Sally. I appreciate that too. I appreciate your comment on that. Okay, thank you everyone. We're right on time, so let me just finish with my last one of my other favorite quotations, which is from the 1800s, from the 19th century. Benjamin Brewster said this: in theory, there's no difference between theory and practice, but in practice there is. So if you've got some interesting ideas from today and some actions that you can put into place, please put them into place as soon as possible. I'm always inspired by one of my favorite clients when I was mentoring her, Dr. Nikki Howe, when we used to have mentoring sessions, and almost immediately after a mentoring session, like definitely within 48 hours, sometimes within 24 hours, she'd get back to me and say, hey Gihan, I tried this out, and this is what I got, what do you think? And I loved that because Nikki was always saying, okay, I haven't just written down this list of things to do, but I'm actually going to put them into action and try them out. So ideally on your list of actions, you've got something that you can try and put into place straight away. So this is my last message. Don't wait Don't wait for the world to be ready for you. Don't wait until until you're not busy anymore. Don't wait until there's a change of government or there's a change in the economic environment. Start before you're ready, because the world won't wait for you. Thanks everyone. Thanks for coming. Thanks for participating. And we'll send out the recording to this afterwards. If you're watching the recording, hope you got value from it as well. Thanks everyone. Have a great day. Bye for now.